I am very, very excited on behalf of the Singapore Tourism Board and the whole team here at Klook to welcome you to the first of our mini webinar series on Reset, Recalibrate and Reignite bookings and revenue here for tourism in Singapore. My name is Henry Hooper. I am the Business Development Director for Singapore, Malaysia and Indonesia, and I will be your host and moderator for today's session. We wish this could be an in-person event. I was just looking now, we have more than 200 people already signed up and there were almost double that registered. So unfortunately, there is some housekeeping that I do need to address and let you be aware of. So we are going to be together for the next 1 hour. And in that time, we have muted everybody, again, on sheer numbers. There's many people involved. But we would love to hear from you. And we think that we have some very, very gifted people here to share some insight. Today is all about learning. So please see there is a Q&A section down on Zoom, down the bottom. Please make yourself familiar with it and submit your questions as they come up. Now, in terms of today's session and what we'll be sharing, we have a brief address from the Singapore Tourism Board's Lynette Pang, and then a very short presentation by Wilfred. But we will be, I suppose, sharing things that we don't feel are necessarily revolutionary. Many of you may be doing these things already, but execution is so important in these times. And what we really want to leverage is Wilfred's experience on how to execute some of these things that can help return bookings and revenue as quickly as is humanly possible. From our side, then we'll be sharing some case studies, hopefully looking to inspire from around the world. And then finally, we'll move into the Q&A session. There'll be plenty of time. We've even had some pre-suggested questions. So I will cover as many questions as I can, given the time period. But without further ado, I would like to move forward to the opening remarks by Lynette Pang, Assistant Chief Executive of STB's Marketing Group. Let's hear from Lynette. So Lynette needs no introduction. If you're unfamiliar with Lynette, I highly recommend you get to know her more personally. But from a brief introduction standpoint, Lynette's responsible for building the Singapore destination and the brand really globally in both the B2C, the leisure area, but also B2B and MICE, covering more than 20 markets. Outside of running the entirety of the marketing decisions made by STB, she's also responsible for strategic partnerships of the marketing variety and corporate communications. So let's hear some very quick introductory words from Lynette.
Hello, this is Lynette Pang from the Singapore Tourism Board. Welcome to the STB Klook webinar series on what's next for travel in the new normal. It will be some time before we can fully welcome tourists back to Singapore. However, we have to continue to engage our customers and make sure they choose our products when they are ready to travel again. It's important to understand how consumer behavior and needs have changed due to COVID-19 and redesign the customer experience and marketing to meet those needs. This is why the STB Marketing College has partnered Klook to provide free webinars to help our tourism stakeholders and marketers upskill and to win new customers. I hope you will find the webinar useful. Do stay safe and have a good learning journey ahead.
So as we've discussed or mentioned already, today is absolutely all about learning, and there is a broad audience here today from all sorts of industries. So I would like to now introduce our keynote speaker, Wilfred Fun. Wilfred is the Chief Commercial Officer working with the team here at Klook. In terms of his responsibilities, Wilfred runs the supply business development and the operations division globally for us. Wilfred's had a very interesting background, and the Q&A is something that I'm personally very much looking forward to, because I think there is some insight to be shared here for everybody. With more than 20 years experience in the online and travel industry, Wilfred really has a holistic view, having worked across various BUs and vast experiences. So prior to joining Klook, Wilfred was a founding member of the Agoda team, and there's certainly things to learn. So I'll now be handing over to Wilfred. One final note before I pass to you, Wilfred, is that we are obviously in working from home conditions. I will be driving the slides for Wilfred, so we will make it as smooth a journey as we possibly can from a technology standpoint. Wilfred, I'm going to click over the next slide and over to you.
Okay, so, well, very delighted to be talking to our friends and friends in the travel industry in Singapore. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about, how do we deal with the pandemic in the current situation, what we see is happening in other parts around the world, and to share that information with you, to give you our perspective of how we can revive and rebuild the industry. And the two key areas is really to look at how we can recalibrate your offerings and your operations, because the customer demand has changed, because for the moment, we don't have inbound tourists. And we are all shifting to domestic business, focusing on how to provide a service that maybe a lot of you are primarily focusing on inbound tourists and international travelers, but now the customers available in your home market, as in Singapore, is a very significant network of people we have there. So how do we recalibrate and adjust our services to that need? At the same time, how the overall industry is adapting itself to reignite the business, to reignite the, not just reignite, I would say, really to fulfill the pent-up demand for people who has not been able to travel, cannot really leave home in some places, and in Singapore to a certain extent. And when that lockdown is lifted, there will be a surge in demand on experiences. So yes, next slide. The COVID-19 pandemic is really unlike anything we have seen. So here are some statistics and information we have gathered to share with you. It was originally compared to SARS in the early days. I think there was a lot of reference back in January and February. But now, as we see it globally, there are there are millions of people who are infected, and there's more with the surge in some part of the world, like in Latin America, the African continents, and also the USA, right? It continues to go up, the number of people who are infected and people who die from this pandemic. So I think it was a good reference, but we have some data point here as in the recovery, right, process. In SARS 2003, we have probably seen a pretty surprisingly fast pickup of business, returning to normal within a matter of months. And in some places, even weeks. There was a void for 3 to 6 months period, but once that is over, business picked up, international travel picked up. The supply chain hasn't really been disrupted too much. But in the current situation, we are seeing an extended impact, and to the magnitude of over 197 million job losses, and it's still counting. That was the data point we have found from the World Tourism and Travel Council that they have presented in June. And now we're already in July, and the financial impact on the GDP is up to 5.5 trillion. So that's the current estimate. And not too long ago, I think it was in May, that 5.5 trillion was starting from around 3 trillion. So every 2-3 months, there is a huge amount of impact that just adds up to it. So just to give you a perspective how big the difference is and how much more significant the current event is. And in terms of recovery, we have gathered some information from McKinsey and also from other sources that the projected recovery is going to be starting from the end of the year and on to 2021. You see that in China is recovering a little faster. They bottom out in Q1 based on the data that we have found, and already quite a bit more domestic travel has resurfaced, and we do see that there's a potential trend for them to get back to where they were towards the end of the year or early next year. other markets around the world, including the US and Europe, and also the rest of the world, is going to pick up a little slower. And in terms of what people are concerned about, the information we've gathered from Google is that the vast majority of people in our neighborhood in Asia Pacific, health and safety is obviously the #1 concern. Some are more severe, as in Malaysia, that the people that we have looked at, the data we have reviewed, shows that half the people are most concerned about health and safety. And that takes time for people to get used to traveling again, get used to, living with COVID. And the other impact is the financial impact of a lot of people that might have lost a job, or at least, having reduced business compared to what they are used to. So their financial planning, business-wise and personally, has been disrupted. And so with less money to spend, they are more cautious about how they would budget for travel. Next slide. And how do we adapt the operation to the new normal? And we have a few ideas and observations that we have gathered and want to share with you. So it's really around two areas. The most practical things that we have seen that is working in other parts of the world, whether it be Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and other parts of Asia Pacific. So the first part is on focusing on health and safety. What are the precautionary measures and standards we can implement? And we have seen that it's working. And the second part of it is about how to adjust your operations and your processes and take advantage of technology to improve efficiency and reach out to your audience. So the first one here is really about hygiene and safety measure. This is something that is, I believe a lot of our friends in the industry are already monitoring, applying, and having a certain standard in place. But it's never enough to keep ourselves on our toes to make sure that this is at the very high standard at all times. That this is an ongoing measure. This is basically a long-term investment as we see it, that it wouldn't go away. This is something that is expected. There are a lot of government policies and regulations that is in place to help you understand what is the minimum requirement, but we do encourage our friends in industry to go beyond the minimum. And we'll be sharing some examples later. And if you do have that measure in place, we encourage you to also promote it and communicate to customers. I think earlier when we saw the data pointing to general people concerned about health and safety, it's a matter of trust and building that trust and communication of what you have in place, your hygiene measures, your processes, your crowd and capacity control standard is something that we really encourage you to keep mentioning and bringing up, and help your audience and your potential customers to understand what you have done and what you're doing. And at Klook, we also have that notice on a lot of our partners to be featured on our website, on our mobile app, that is prominently placed on the front page of every activities we promote. The second thing we like to highlight is the interaction between people. With the current new normal, a lot of people are worried about social distancing. And to encourage social distancing, we really can rely on technology, such as QR code and RFID scanning. And that is not something new. It's been around for well over a decade. I remember back in the, about maybe 15 years ago, there were already very prominent use of QR code in places like Japan and Korea, in communication, in media, and in a lot of practical use as well. And this is a standard technology that is available quite easily And of course, at Klook, we have also implemented quite extensively, and something that we can share with our partners how to make use of it. So on our standard confirmation and voucher to our customers, we have the QR code available. We also provide QR code scanners to our business partner if they don't have that technology in-house, or they do, or we can even make it available on the mobile apps of our merchant partners to make use. So customer can purchase, receive the confirmation via email, they pay via electronic means and digital means without cash. So it really encourages not just us as an example, but also for yourself to apply different type of payment options that is digital based and reduce the use of cash. And there's no physical ticket required, and customer comes in, use a QR code, and the operator can scan that, and the customer get through the gate and start to enjoy the service. The third thing I like to point out is the importance of being flexible. There's a lot of uncertainty of the stages that each of the countries is going through. So we could be at 1.1, 1.2, and sometimes we may step back and go forward, depending on the situation of different countries. A good example is in Hong Kong, that it was pretty much clear of local infection, and then suddenly there's a surge just 3 days ago. And now the country, well, in Hong Kong, the city is going back to a lockdown mode to a great extent. And that really makes the customer concerned about if they purchase something right now, and if they cannot use it, what's the policy? How flexible is it? And if they're not sure, if they have concern, they would delay the decision and not to commit, even though they really intend to go to a specific activity or location and attractions, they may just not do it because of uncertainty. If you are able to provide more flexible policies for cancellations and amendments, this will help to at least confirm the intents and lock in the customers and commitment early on. So you can also plan ahead on your operation, understand how you manage staffing, understand how you manage the operating hours, working closely with the authority on when you can officially open, and make the adjustment quickly. And if you see any concern, or if the regulation prohibit you from opening up at the time you plan to, with a very flexible policy, you can go back to the customer quickly and let them know that they will have to rebook, and the policy allows them, and also they will stay with you, right? They understand they can't go now, but they can go at a later time. On the opposite end is if you have a strict policy that is non-refundable, or you need customers to cancel, more than 3 or 7 days out, then you just won't capture the demand at the beginning. So when business is coming back to normal and when things are opening up, it just make it very hard for you to forecast operations, support, staffing, and other things that you need to prepare when you open for business. And then covering the basic of health and safety measures, and also providing more flexibility for the customers, we look at the offer itself. We have one example here from a hotel in Hong Kong, that they are, this is mostly a business hotel, and they have been relying a lot on the business travelers from around the world, which has been a mainstay in Hong Kong for many years. And now that is gone. So they have to pivot to adjust their operation to focus on the local families. And here they provide accommodation, meals, and also cooking classes for the children to entertain the whole family. That we look at not just creating a promotion, but also adjusting the operations, communicating with the staff in the F&B units, the chefs, and procuring additional amenities like what you see on the picture here, the colorful chef hats for the children, and then they put together the effort across the entire organization and come up with this to support it. And is it going to be successful? I think that's a big question for a lot of you thinking like, if I do make this change, if I do, procure things or adjust the operation and regroup our entire human resources in the company, is it going to be successful? The answer is uncertain, but it's better, way better than not doing anything, right? The hotels we work with and the partners we work with in multiple markets that they have seen an uptick. There are some that is seeing really big success, filling up the entire operation or up to the government limit that is placed on between 25 to 75% occupancy. And there are some that is not as successful. But the ones that is suffering the most are the ones that haven't tried anything and just relying on what they have done before and not adjusting to the new normal. And then now we talk about adjusting your services and customizing your offers to the current environment and catering more to the domestic customers. The next thing we need to look at is, do you have the same amount of resources available as you had before COVID? Some of you may have to limit your manpower, or some of you may be fortunate enough to maintain and sustain the manpower, but having the same manpower and the same resources to do the same thing as before, it's just not viable anymore. We're expecting an extended period of lower demand without the international travelers, and this could extend for a few more months. And how do we deal with it? We need to work smart. We need to make more from what we have. And that's when technology really comes in handy. Technology as in inventory management, technology applied for transactions and customer service, and all that will allow you to, firstly, to support what I mentioned earlier, a more flexible policy to the customers without adding more workload on your operation. And secondly, to free up manpower from dealing with operations and administrations to work on communication, marketing, and promotions, right? Making your service known to more audience who may not be your primary audience in the past, even though you could be a popular brand in the travel industry, but we're talking about a very different segment that we're trying to penetrate. And you need to have additional resources to target, to promote, and communicate. You may have a decent budget to do that, but there are a lot of things that can be done even without a large budget in marketing and campaigning, right? As long as you are aware and able to make good use of technology available. We talk about the operational technology. We also have, there's a lot of marketing technology that you can apply at nominal cost to try it out, and then you can invest more as things start to develop positively. So just a recap of the 5 things that we have seen that is working quite well across the region: the health and safety standards and touchless technology to support social distancing. That is definitely a must for any operation that service customers on site. And then we talk about additional enhancement of customer outreach, right? Having a more flexible policy to lower the risk concern of the customers, and customizing and being creative on your offers, as well as applying technology to help with customer service and operation, as well as media and marketing. So we'd like to share with you a few cases we have seen that is probably a good reference for you in Singapore. The first one is our partner in China. Next slide, please. The Shanghai Disneyland. So I believe, Disneyland in Shanghai, and we have also seen in other locations in North America, in Hong Kong and Japan, they really, I mean, the customers have very high expectation for them to start with. It's a primary objective for them to maintain, provide a healthy environment, and then to make sure that the brand, as a family-friendly brand, they have to do the utmost to make sure that it's a safe environment for everyone who goes there. So they have applied very strict attendance and occupancy control with advanced reservation required, and also the entry system is upgraded to support that. There is no more flex passes, as in people cannot just keep going in and leaving the location. And there is a very strict limit per day, social distancing in all the lines as you see in the picture, that is applicable to all the rides throughout the park. Hand sanitizers before each ride and available in multiple locations throughout the park. Masks being handed out at entry point for every customer, whether they have one or if they don't, but just to make sure that is available. And then the last part, which I believe is the most important and sometimes a little overlooked, is the training for the staff, how to deal with every possible situation that arises, right? What if a customers drop the mask during a ride? What do we do? What are there, there might be food related issues at the park, how to handle that. There might be complaints, or there might be overcrowded in certain areas, how to reduce that risk. So all that comes with very diligent training and planning for the operation, which I think Shanghai Disneyland set a pretty high standard there. And Universal Studio in Japan, that they are preparing to open. And what we are seeing right now is a lot of preparation being done. And we really admire the way they handle the processes and the details in that communication. So we have a few examples here. Next slide. On how they look at different things and what are the measures in place and how they communicate that. It's not just by having signposts, not by just having notice on the websites, but also instructional videos available on all the key areas, including the first one here on the top left is the annual pass holders. So they do not allow just a walk-in customers to come through. You need to be annual pass holders that they focus on the most important customers of theirs, right? That's the first thing. They are servicing that critical mass and base of customers first, and pre-registration is required. And then the other things like temperature check, mask, and distancings and disinfections of the rides is pretty standard. But the fact that they have this kind of information in an interactive way to communicate with the customers is really make a difference, right? It shows how committed and how high a standard they hold when they prepare all this information, and how much thought has to put into making this happen. And on the bottom left there, you will also see that they have the registration and tracing system in accordance with the local authority in Osaka. So all that gives a customer, if you see this is what they have prepared, if you see what how far they go to make this information accessible and educational, you will feel a lot more comfortable and willing to go and go back and experience with less fear and concern as you normally would. And the next case I'd like to share with you is in Singapore, something that we are working on and still developing and going to launch. We are just still in the preparation mode, but what we are doing in how to be creative in the current environment and how to adjust the communication and the operation together with our partners. This is an example with the Shangri-La Hotel, where in addition to a staycation offer of breakfast, dining, and activities, We also created additional value for with the Shangri-La to the customers, luring people who may not consider going to a hotel as the destination to have, to basically have a holiday at a hotel as a staycation, but really creating additional value, right? In terms of the kids play zone, in terms of the themes and amenities that is prepared. So I would say this is a very positive step of how a relatively, focused operation in the past decades to support business travelers and leisure travelers going to Singapore to pivot into promoting their service and make an adjustment to address a different need, to address a new demand and generate that new demand in order to support operations and their staff who might have been affected and probably affected quite a bit over the past few months by the COVID pandemic. So I think that is the last example, Henry.
That's it, Wilfred. So we've got another half hour for questions, which is fantastic. We're just going to have a quick scene change. I'm going to de-share my screen, and my colleague Fuwei is going to be sharing his screen so we can jump into the question time. So Fuwei, when you get a second, just put the Q&A screen up there. That's fantastic. And thank you very much, Wilfred. While we're waiting for Fuwei, and I'm sifting through some questions on my side, can you hear me there? Well, okay, that's all right. So I wanted to ask a question to yourself, Wilfred, because I think your background is very much from the hotels industry, 15 years in hotels. And hotels, as we know now, is a very mature market for both online bookings and also OTAs. So bearing in mind, we have a very broad audience here. We have tour operators, we have some airlines, F&B, hotels, attractions. It's quite broad. I was hoping you could share with us some insights on what happened last time in a world-changing event and a pivot in an industry, because I do think that some of the operators here, there's a chance to learn from what worked in the past. Maybe like 9/11 or I mean, SARS, obviously there's been some tsunamis, but what can you share with what has happened in the past and been quite successful that could be of interest to such a broad audience and so many people?
Sure, yes. I have personally experienced in the industry quite a lot of unfortunate incidents, natural disasters and man-made disasters, political turmoil in different countries. And there is always a few things that I learned, and it's been quite consistent. The first one is really about how resilient the industry is, how tough a situation it was at the time, including the few times that you mentioned, the few incidents, 9/11 in North America, and that has affected the global airline industry and the tourism industry. Then the SARS pandemic back in 2004, and then the tsunami that happened in Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean tsunami, and also Japan, the earthquake in Japan. That was quite devastating for the Japanese tourism market. But each and every time when people are being very pessimistic about the future, they are surprised by how fast it rebounds, how fast people are coming back to areas where it was affected, to places that, were damaged by the natural disasters. And once the government declared that it's safe to travel, once the operation is back to normal, the demand is just so resilient that people just come back very quickly, within months, back to where it was before. The other important thing is how different operators are able to adjust their operations and their priorities. Well, as you mentioned, I'm more familiar with the hotel industry in the past, and each time when there are changes, the industry need to go back and look at how they were doing things before what was the status quo and see how they can fine tune it to adjust, reducing operation costs, improving the operations, the processes, how to find and identify and also acquire new demand, right? Because there is a shift in markets. In some places, there might be tension between some countries, as in Japan and Korea. That has happened multiple times in the past 2 decades, all the way back to the previous millennium. And every time that happens, a lot of operators might depend on this bilateral travel, has to look further into new markets from other origins that they have to develop themselves. And the traditional way of going on sales trip, promoting the service and attending trade shows will only get so far. And it takes a very long time. And that's when I see a very fast shift, a paradigm shift almost, from offline to online channels, right? The transition in 911 for hotels in North America to promote the service online to the likes of Expedia and Hotel.com back in the days was so drastic that it, not just the industry itself, but the customers, the audience, are very quickly educated that, well, online purchase is viable and there are a lot of selections and it's very attractive and it's much faster to see impact. That in itself is one thing which translates into a lot of changes in operations, going from changing of the distribution and communication channel to how the reservation and process are received, right? Then we need to look at how the operations are adapting channel manager solutions, yield management, because having the same price year round for the same customer they rely on may not work anymore. When there's a shift, they need to adjust on dynamic pricing and yield management and understand how to maximize the yield and the occupancy when the business is back, but from different sources and different segments. And that also translates into some automation within each of the hotels and other travel businesses, how to take that information and look at data to understand how to process and prioritize and forecast is very significant. And it really changed some of the brands and the companies I've seen in the past from some of the mediocre brand, as in, the scales and the brand reach and also the financial health, to the A players, to true winner in the industry for those who are embracing this shift. And they wouldn't otherwise have done it if it wasn't for this different difficulties they see in the market. If things are smooth sailing, if things are going well, if business is just as good and every year they would just put in 5% year-on-year growth without fail, there is no real need to reinvent themselves. But because of this adversity, they have to. And those who have done a good job, I've seen them going so well and really climb the ladder and really able to deliver amazing results for the customers, for their team who is with them, and also for the owners and investors. It's just so dramatic every time there is a change in the market. I think that this risk-reward relationship is magnified every time we have this adversity.
And to build off that, Wilfred, we've got a follow-up here from Chloe. Thank you, Chloe, for your questions. Feel free to throw some more questions in, guys. Just to follow up on that, how would you address this for maybe smaller businesses? I think a lot of the things you've spoken about there in terms of yield management and getting maximum occupancy, etc., that's quite easy easier if you're the Marriott. What would you advise to the kind of smaller players? What are some of the quick, easy wins that you could advise to look into, or if you're on a shoestring budget?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier for larger corporations to change. They have more resources, financially and manpower-wise, and they can apply bigger changes, right? They can procure technology at a higher cost that they can afford. But to actually implement change across the entire organization that might have thousands of people or tens of thousands of people, actually it makes them move very slow. But for smaller operator, the advantage is the agility. Being small means that you can make decisions very quickly, right? It's the owners, the managers, and the team members together and look at the options available and then make a call, right? And with the amount of data available on hand that they have seen in the operation, and also working with other parts of the industry, right? Working with the tourism board, working with online and offline partners to ask for additional data to help to validate what they plan to do. Let's say they are eager to position themselves for the domestic business. But what is the demand like? Because they have never done it before, they have no data and they have no reference. And that's when external help is available to provide them with the very basic set of data to help them make decisions. So that's one thing that is important and available today. It wasn't available 10, 15 years ago because technology doesn't allow everybody to get a big data, but now it's just there. And for our partners, in the industry, that we are always ready to help, to share that information. The second thing that is quite important is the preparation of, beyond just a plan B. There needs to be a few other options available. And the success factor really depends on how easy it is to roll out some changes, how fast these changes can be adjusted and pivoted until we find a sweet spot, until we find a viable direction to start to expand and grow the business again. It's quite likely that the first one or two ideas wouldn't work, right? But my experience in the industry is that learning from these examples and failures very quickly and in a stealth mode, right, will help you to find what is successful. So if a smaller tour operator is looking to create a new itinerary, it may not even require you to launch it, but you can promote it and see if there's an inquiry in the market. And once you see that there's inquiries and there's real interest in the market, then you put the rest of the operation to build that itinerary, right? To really put into place the logistics available. But to launch some things that would take, it may take months in the past to prepare and launch something. But now we need to work a lot faster. We're talking about weeks and even days to make the same thing happen. And it may not be as detailed and as foolproof as before, but in unusual times, we need to take unusual measures.
Sure, and again, this dovetails into that nicely from anonymous attendee. Want to hear your thoughts, Wilfred, on work from home measures and sort of what that looks like for the travel industry. The question's mentioning here that obviously there's a positive environmental impact to that. Do you have any, the question is, one, do you think that will return, and how is the travel industry different? We've had the likes of Twitter and Square come out and say you can work from home forever. How is travel different from that, apart from the obvious ones? Operations need to be on the ground. Keen to get your thoughts on if you think that will return, and if so, when, to what level?
Fundamentally, the travel industry is about interpersonal connections, right? People who want to travel to another place to explore is because they want to be there in person. So there's no avoiding in, especially the service team members of the companies in the industry, to be there in front of the customers, in front of the travelers. That just has to happen. If it's completely virtual and digital and remote, it just lower the value proposition of the industry in itself. So when is it going to happen? When is it going to return? I don't know. But is it going to return? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But in terms of operation that is not in the front line, I think, well, very personally, I believe it's going to be a hybrid model. Right? It's quite likely to be the office and the business location is for when people come together to work on ideas, brainstormings, alignment, discussions, and making decisions together. And also building the interrelationship within the company, training and development of the talents, right? That happens together in a location on site, while the rest of the day-to-day administrative operational work that can be done online through digital means, with a lot of file sharings and data sharing technology available, that many of them actually are free. I believe that there is no real need for people to be at the office every single day of the year. So I see that a hybrid solution is likely to be the preferred solution or the preferred arrangement for a lot of businesses.
Okay. A question here from Yasmin. Thank you for sharing. How is the Klook app reaching out to new potential market segments, and how do you go about thinking about what they are? You mentioned earlier you encourage people to think about reaching these new segments. How do you think about that, and how does Klook think about that?
Yeah, well, we are very fortunate to have local operations in 29 locations around the world. So when I say local operation, it doesn't mean that we have customer service team looking after the travelers, but the people that we have on the ground are firstly the teams that is working closely with our merchant partners, our industry partners. And together with that, we have local marketing team to work with those partners to understand how to promote and package and communicate all the selling points and experiences and content we want to share with our customers. And that is a really big advantage for us because we are very much localized. And when we have to pivot from international travel to domestic travel, which is our primary focus right now, we can utilize the same resources. We have team members in all the countries that we operate in. And in Singapore, we have our regional marketing team in place who really understand the behavior of the customers locally, right? Who really understand the merchants and the partners, what they're looking for and what they can offer. And we put the two things together to try to make it work. And the communication channel is very much online and digital. We use a lot of social media communications. We create our own content on video clips, photos, and via Facebook, Instagram, and all this means that is popular among the audience of today. And our roots of the company is focusing on the millennials. And that is the most receptive channel for them in communicating all these deals and offers and services and experiences available in each market. We have the same operation in Japan, in China, and in Southeast Asia, Australia. So 29 locations around the world, we have that structure. And it's a blessing, right? For a lot of international businesses, they really centralize the marketing communication in one place, and they may not have that local touch and local understanding, which makes it a little harder. So it was originally when we launched it, it's a serious consideration. It's a big investment to have that local investment, but now it's a blessing in disguise that we can, shift gear very quickly and start to make an impact in many markets where the lockdown is over, and then people are free to travel within the country.
Cool. Some quick admin, Tushar. We can definitely share the deck. We have to confirm how to share. The question was, will the recording be shared? The deck is for sure available. We'll come back to you on the recording, but that's a quick admin one. Another one for Wilfred. I think this is really interesting. So this is clearly a hotel operator. In light of the increase in basically investment of account of these additional safety measures, When do you think it's right to raise prices back up, and how do you think customers will respond to these sort of price increases?
It's the principle of yield management, right? And market mechanism. So I think for a hotel operators or any travel business operator, you just need to try, right? I think it's quite receptive to the customers. These days, they are well educated. It wasn't the case when I started in the industry that a certain hotel is at a certain price, right? Once, well, very interestingly, the common concern of the hotel industry back in the day is, what if a customer's meeting with another guest at the hotel at breakfast and find out that they pay much more or much less than the next table? They would be upset. We have our brand reputation to protect. But that era is over. People have changed, the expectation and perception has completely changed in terms of pricing. So price in the hotel industry, the airline industry, and I believe quite strongly that in the overall experience and tourism market will shift to much more dynamic basis. And that means that if you raise the price and there's no demand, it's not the right time to raise it, but give it a try. If your company, if your operation requires 6 layers of approval and a signature before you can adjust the price, then you need to adjust your operation, right? Pricing adjustment should be very seamless, should be empowered to whomever is having the knowledge and the capability to run a effective pricing management or revenue management operation in any operation, any business in the industry. So I think, that's a pretty long answer, but the takeaway here is it's all about how the demand and supply mechanism work and finding equilibrium, and having the ability to find equilibrium is key.
Sure. No, yeah, try and you shall receive, I suppose. One here from Pete. Unfortunately, there are only 2 days in a weekend. Other than kind of promos and slashing prices, can you suggest any other ways to attract locals, particularly looking at kind of midweek engagements when there's low occupancy? Any ideas there?
Yeah. So even during the week, there are 24 hours. Right? There are some hours just not feasible, as in people still need to sleep. But from the time when people are off work or off school until they go to bed, there are many hours that you can consider how to cater to that group of customers who might be looking for something to do. Right? I think the starting point is about what would the customer be interested in? What's the intent? Are they willing to spend some money? Are they willing to travel a little bit? The alternative is to stay home and do nothing. Go on the internet, watch some TV, have cooking at home, and you are providing an alternative. So you're competing with that status quo of easy, relaxing time at home versus going somewhere to do something fun. Now, not every operator and not every service will match that need. So we will have to go back and look at if there's something available in the inventory, in the range of service that could fit that need. And if there is, try to customize it and promote it. Yes, there's only Saturday and Sunday available, but the rest of the week, I think there is also possibility that a lot of people are not working full week because of lower amount of business being handled, and they might be interested to spend some time and relax and clear their mind and enjoy themselves a bit more if you provide an attractive alternative.
I got a couple of questions here. I'm paraphrasing some of them in text, so I'm conscious of time. Keen to hear your thoughts specifically on the size of tour groups. A couple of tour operators are asking about smaller tours, sort of smaller families. You know, the bigger groups are probably unlikely to return. Keen to hear your thoughts on that. If there's any other markets that you've seen similar behaviour and similar activity, just yeah, keen to share if possible, please.
Right, it's a combination of government policy, what the government would allow, right? That is the upper limit. And the lower limit is whether it's financially viable to have a service that might only limit to 4 people, right? Or even less. And in between is where you can see how to play with, right? Let's assume that the upper limit is 20 and the lower limit is 4. So between that, we have a wide range. And then you need to look at the comfort zone of the customers. That is very hard to gauge, right? If you try to push something out for up to the government limit of 20, and you find that there's no interest, then one of the factor is, you know, the perception of risk. And that can only be tested. There's no yes or no answer. And that answer also changes over time. And other option is to create, you know, 2 different sets of offers. One would be, you know, a tour offer for, you know, individual customers to come together. And the other option is private service for a family or extended family, that you will allow a tour to operate at a minimum of say 5 and up to 10, and only from one customers who book the service, right? That is an option. Of course, there's a much smaller segment that you can attract, but given the safety concern, it might be very attractive, and they might be willing to pay a bit more for that kind of privacy and, you know, higher safety measure.
Sure. Maybe one more, and then we probably need to wrap it up and sort of some final comments. But I think this is an interesting one, Glenn. Thank you for sharing. Wilfred, what's your opinion on virtual tours? So these are increasingly popular, obviously, because of COVID. Do you think that they'll be a sustainable revenue source post-COVID? And how does this play out in your head?
I think it's a very attractive alternative when people cannot travel, right? And are people willing to pay for it to the extent that is financially viable for companies to operate? That, you know, break-even point is hard to gauge. Some of the most impressive virtual reality solutions available, like what, you know, Facebook and Google invested in, turns out to be a major loss and a big write-off for those businesses. Even they pump in hundreds of millions of dollars to make it amazing. People are not willing to pay for it. And there are some, like a lot of the museums are providing virtual tours at nominal cost or even low cost. That becomes very popular. But does it really drive enough money for a business to sustain? I think that in itself, virtual reality tours and experiences in itself, it's not easy to sustain. One is what I mentioned already, the customer willingness to spend. The other one is very much tied to the cost of technology. That goes down very quickly over time. Just look at your mobile phone, right? The same mobile phone with the function and features you have right now compared to 10 years ago, it's night and day. People are willing to pay for a fraction of the function and capability of what you have now at a much higher cost. And the cost of all those components and technology and IPs just keep going down when it becomes a mass market offer. So what I see is the true opportunity is the combination of virtual experience, virtual tours, to offline amenities purchase. Souvenirs, artifacts, and things that you can purchase and extend the experience as a communication and connection of your brand to the customers, but make money from the business in other means. I think that is quite an attractive combination, and a lot of the industry partners can consider.
Interesting. I am just conscious of time. Fuwei, if you're able to just jump to the next slide, some closing remarks from myself. Firstly, thank you, Wilfred, very much for the insight. And I'm sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions. There was too many. But we do have a second installment of our mini webinar series partnering with the Singapore Tourism Board. Our next session is taking place on the 23rd of July. Please sign up if you would like, and please submit some questions if there are specific things that you're very curious to hear from. Outside of that, thank you everyone for your time. We really appreciate you spending the last hour with us. Thank you, Wilfred, and thank you to the Singapore Tourism Board for co-hosting this webinar. That's all from us. Stay safe, stay well, and have a fantastic day. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.